The way I lived is now doesn't exist anymore. Is that you or me? You know, squatting, travelling around. I mean, people do still live in buses and whatever, but people don't squat anymore, really. It's illegal, unless you're squatting commercial properties, so a lot of people don't really do that anymore. I loved it. I love squatting. I met so many brilliant people from all around the world. Yeah, London. I squatted in Birmingham as well when I came back from London, but that was much harder because in London, when I first started squatting, if you go to a place called the Squatters Advisory Service in was it King's Cross? I forget where it was now, but there was literally, they had an office. You walked in and they gave you a booklet that told you how to squat and all the legal, and in the front of the booklet there was a rip out sheet for you to rip it out and put it on your front window, which was all the legal. You are not allowed to enter now, we've taken possession of this property. And then not even that, but they were like estate agents for squatters, so they had lists of all the empty properties in your area, who they were owned by, so you only ever squatted places that were housing association or council. The idea was you'd never squat a private house. People did do, and they got squatters into gave squatters a bad name basically, because obviously you can't really go and live in someone else's house, really, morally. But if you're taking a property like the council haven't rented for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you go in, you make it warm, you repair it. That's the way we were. We'd go in, we'd repair what was damaged, we'd clean it all up, we'd air it, we'd dry it out, we'd live in it with other people. It was a lovely way of living for free. Sometimes we'd have the electricity for free because there was something called a company head. If you went into a derelict house, you could take out the company head, out the electricity, if there wasn't any electric there or you couldn't get it on. And then the next time, I've probably still got one somewhere, but that was illegal, but really. And then if you went into another house, the electricity board, when it became empty, would take, or whoever would take the company head out. If you put your company head in and flick the switch, quite often, the electricity had come on. And because they hadn't got a name and they didn't know who to contact, you kind of got it for free, which I always thought that's the perk of squatting, because you're not charging rent to the council, being unemployed, you're saving money for the government or the council by squatting. So you're taking it off the electricity board. Obviously it's not really correct, but it was part of living. Same with the TV licence. You didn't have to buy a TV licence because, one, you'd have probably dogs with you. So none of the TV licensing people would want to come in. So there were some perks about it. And in London, when you got a place, when I was squatting there in the 80s, on average, you'd have 2 years before they'd evict you, because there was so many people in line with the courts. There was a poster I had at one point, something like 680,000 empty properties, 670,000 homeless people. So you could see there was more properties empty than there were people on there. So that's wrong, really wrong. So you felt like you were fighting for justice for people who, if you were unemployed, you went to try and rent somewhere. There used to be a phrase, no Irish, no blacks, no dogs, no DHSS. You know, no Irish, no black, no dogs was pubs, which is obviously, I remember seeing a sign on a pub saying that, and now that obviously that's illegal, and rightfully so. So, yeah. But that was the way back then. I couldn't find anywhere to live. Lots of times I was technically homeless for 20 odd years. I never called myself homeless, but I'd have to go and find somewhere to live, 4 walls and a roof, with or without electricity. And then I started living in a van because no one can evict you from your own van. So that's kind of nice. I had 2 ambulances. I've definitely had one. I had a Ford Transit ambulance. That was my first vehicle that I bought. They have to have their siren disconnected. You can stand in an ambulance. It was lovely, lovely vehicle. I didn't know at the time, but they'd fixed a lot of the bodywork with newspaper. With the modern world, I've seen it with caravan shows, little small space living. There's so many ideas. It's just not as hard as it used to be, I don't think. People have heaters, they have toilets in their vehicles. I never had a toilet. I'd have to wash using saucepans, no shower. They have showers, they have toilets, they have their TV with their solar panels and their batteries, and they make it all lovely and cosy,
yeah,
nice.
You can't park anywhere you want.
No, that's the trouble. No one lets you park anywhere. You're not allowed here, not in my backyard. Council, you know, there used to be common land you could park on. They've got rid of a lot of the common land. There used to be travellers' sites where you could park. There's not many of those left, I don't think. And a lot of them are like kind of, they just put a load of concrete and they put you in the middle of loads of big high walls. Or people, the point about living in a van partly is to have the beauty of nature wherever you're moving, and you can choose, like people on narrow boats, you can travel around and go, this is, well, not quite the same because they've got to rent their moorings, but the idea is that you're free. And when you're up on top of a mountain and you've got a beautiful view, you think, oh, I'm going to stay here for a week, or I'm going to just open my door and that's my front garden.
Yeah.
Right, so we were ready to roll. I'm going to try and make an oodoo drum. So I've put a bit of water on the wheel head, and I'm going to give it a good throw down so it sticks to the middle of the wheel like that. Then we're going to pat centre it, which makes it all nice and smooth, and it just makes life easier for you. This clay is quite hard, so I might have a little bit of trouble coning it. Now I'm going to cone it, so I'm going to spin it round fairly fast, like that. Oh, I haven't got my box of tools. I need that. And I need a decent rib. Like that one, nice square rib. Because there's quite a lot of clay there, so now I'm going to forget about the pedal. I'm going to get near to the wheel head. Probably don't need my glasses. We'll find out. And I'm going to start coding. So water, I'm going to push against that ball of clay and smooth it all down first. And then I'm going to squeeze the bottom in, push at the top, and bring my thumbs together so I get a little point. Same again, look. Squeeze at the bottom, water, little and often with that water. Up we come. I'm a big kid, so I like coning quite tall. You don't really have to. I'm tidying up the base of the wheel so I can get my little fingers underneath the clay. To do that, you just got to watch when you go too tall whether that top flies off or not. Whoops, get to the top. This is a bit of a wobble here, so that's going to start fighting me when I get down there, look. As you get down there, if I push with my palm at the front, as I'm going down, it's going to centre that bit. And I'm mixing the clay. I've wedged it up to mix it, but it's good to cone on the wheel to mix it some more. I'm not going to go up so high because I can feel there's lumps in the clay because I skimped on the wedging a little bit. Move it away, fold it down, because if you're coning up and you go straight down without folding it away, that's what happens. When you fold it away and you put pressure on, it will go back into the middle of the wheel for you, like that. So you keep coning until the clay starts to feel like it's nicely mixed. And tuck my fingertips in at the very 12 o'clock point again, so I can get underneath that. The top's going to wobble, there it goes. And that's probably the reason why you shouldn't cone up too high. Doctors seems to be the most popular profession that come. I think it's because they've probably got a little bit of affordable income to afford it, and they just need something completely different to what they do. Like anyone who works in a hospital, the pressure involved, the amount of hours involved, the stresses involved with that job, yeah, it seems to be the most popular profession that comes to my courses, my classes. So you can see the slight wobbles in that clay. So if I'm going to open that out, I'm looking at 3 o'clock and I've got to stop like that, any of the wobbles. If you push in and relax quickly, the clay's always going to bounce back. I'm getting my little fingers underneath that base again. So look, so I'm pushing it in. I'm what I call karate chopping the top to compress the clay down, and I'm looking at 3 o'clock, and then when I get that the way I like it and it's all still, I don't care if I lose bits of clay off the bottom. Once it's perfectly still, I relax the tension in my body before I release the clay, and then it stays put like that. Once I've got it there, I'm now going to open it up. Put my thumb on the 6 o'clock. Lots of people open up like this. I don't like that particularly because for students, because your hands should always be connected. So people do that with the thumb. That's all right because your hands are connected and your thumb's stronger than your fingertips. So I think with people who throw every day of the week, you get repetitive strain probably if you did it like I do. I go in with the fingers and then I draw the fingers back like that. I keep drawing it back. It starts to get dry. I reach for the sponge and give it a little sprinkle. I keep drawing it out until I'm about 1 centimetre away from my thumb. If it starts to overhang, I can take my fingers off there, push against the thumb, lift the thumb up, and then compress. So that's like my wide-ish, chunky bowl. So now I'm going to do compression of the base. So I'm going to drop my digit finger in. This is one of my favourite bits because I like the spirals that you see. That's just detached. So you keep doing that. When you've thrown for a while, you eyeball the base. Sometimes if it's really big, I'll use the side of my fingertip. And if it's catching, very rarely, I'll use a sponge because I like to feel what the base feels like. So, and I get hypnotised by the spirals. So by the time you've done that, your fingertips gliding across the base without bouncing up and down because you've wedged the clay well, or you've coned it well, or you've compressed it well. Once it's doing that and I'm happy with it, I'm just going to take the water off so I can see it. See that it's nice and flat. And then you've got to stop the wheel and have a little check, because with the best will in the world we can get it wrong. I'm doing a no-do drum, hopefully. That's maybe a little bit too thick for a base for the shape I'm making. So it just means I can go back in, drop the base down a little bit more. I can even curve it if I want by bringing the base out less wide if I know that I'm doing a different type of shape. So I'm just gently curving that base now. Then I'm going to start lifting the clay. So lifting the clay, I'm going to collar it all in, or whale's tail I call that shape. Push it in like that. Relax, release. I'm going to slow the wheel speed a little bit. I'm I'm going to do a first lift. It's going to be a palm lift. I'm going to push it in with that palm.
Which part of making pottery would you say is your favourite?
My favourite part of making pottery?
Yeah.
Lifting the lid of the kiln, possibly, and seeing the pots, all the colours of the pots. Seeing them twinkling away and they make these little pinging noises. That sounds like a gamelan sort of orchestra. It's either that or throwing. I love throwing. I love taking the clay and moving it on the wheel. And a lot of the time I've got this idea, I'm making this drum, but most of the time I haven't really got much of a clue what I'm making. I just throw, and then eventually I think, oh, it's going to be a bowl, or it's, you've got to, the earlier you have that idea, the better. But for years I've just played and messed, really, because that's how you learn how to do something. So I'm just pushing that foot in, bringing it up, and then pushing in a little bit more at the top to bring it in like that. Again.
Do you love teaching?
Do I love teaching?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. Really love it. Didn't think I'd do it really because I'm self-taught. I've got no degree or anything. I was lucky that I'm working for a community pottery where one of the tutors left. They needed someone to step in, and it was the early days of Sundragon, and they knew I could throw, so they asked me to take over, and I had imposter syndrome. I was thinking, I don't know about that. I can't really teach, can I? I'd know what I'm doing in terms of what I like to do, but to tell other people how to do it. And then I just thought, well, give it a go. And all you've got to do is teach them not to make the same mistakes that you've made for decades. Because I've learned pre-internet. So I've learned by trial and error. Why am I doing that? Why is that going wrong? How can I change that? I got into it at school. So my form room where they took the register was the pottery room in the school. And the form tutor bloke was the potter of the school. He must have done art as well. Mr. Fountain, his name was Robert Fountain. I tracked him down on Facebook and had a little word with him, and I said, look what you've done to me, you've turned me into a potter. And he was very nice. And yeah, I got into it from there really. Dartmouth High School I went to on the way to Walsall from Great Bar, Scott Arms. First thing I ever remember making was a piggy bank, like a lot of people do. You'd get a ball of clay, put your thumb in it, make what we call a pinch pot. It's like a little, what do you call it, demi-circle or whatever, like a little bowl pinch pot. You put the two pinch pots together, you put 4 little stumpy legs on, curly tail, ball for a head, make a little snout, cut a slit in it for the money to go in, and then a circle at the bottom, and you've got yourself a piggy bank. That's the first thing I ever made. I loved it. I ended up doing pottery O level, but I failed it for various reasons. Some of them being the fact that the kids would go into the pottery room and they'd break your pieces. They'd throw pieces of clay at it, or they'd just mess around in break time, and you'd come back in and your pottery would be broken. But I was just starting to get artistic at 16, really. By the time I got to 16, I started thinking I feel a bit more artistic. Before that, I was all doing maths and economics in A levels. I wanted to do pottery A level, but they wouldn't let me because I'd failed pottery O level. And then, I went to Middlesex Polytechnic to do a diploma of higher education, 2-year course, and then you'd specialise in the 3rd year to do a degree. And the reason I was doing it was because there was an art and design part of it, so I wanted to do art. I couldn't get into art school because I hadn't done art at A level, and I'd failed pottery O level, and I hadn't done pottery A level. So it was my way of getting in, I thought. But I went down there, I took art, science and society, which was about ecology and whatever, communications, which I thought was going to be filmmaking, but it was more about advertising at the first term. And then when I went to do my art there was an interview for the whole course, and they basically told you couldn't do it if you hadn't got a portfolio, and I hadn't got a portfolio. So the people were drawing pictures in the foyer before they went into the room, and I hadn't got anything. So I talked to my tutor, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, there's nothing I could do about that if they're not letting you on because you haven't got a portfolio or anybody." So I'd moved to London, to Trent Park in Middlesex, and I couldn't do the main thing that I wanted to do, so I ended up taking social studies. So instead of doing pottery and art, I was trying to write essays on Karl Marx, and it was horrible. I hate writing essays anyway. Yeah, it was, so I had to drop out, basically. I dropped out after 3 months before Christmas, because in those days, if you dropped out before Christmas, you could retain your grant. So I dropped out to retain the grant, and then I moved up to Lancaster, because when I came home to Birmingham at the Christmas, a friend of mine, Kevin Jones, offered me to go and live in his house with the students up there. He was at Lancaster University. He said, "You can come stay with us." So I moved up there because I didn't want to move back home to my parents. And I enrolled at Lancaster Further Education, or Adult Education College, and I started teaching myself how to throw. The tutor came along. There was couple of lovely studio potters there. I forget the names now. He said, "Oh, do you want me to show you how to centre it, the basics?" I said, "Yeah, please." He showed me. He said, "I'm over there if you need me. Come and ask me." And I didn't go and ask him again, because I'm like that. I wanted to learn it myself, and it took me ages to get the grips with just the centering. But yeah, I'm like that. I want to learn it myself, really. I'm going to do a knuckle lift now, which is pushing your knuckle, because there's a lot of clay here. So if you're doing like a lift with the sponge like this, you move very little clay. You got to get to near the top, pause, relax, release slowly, compress the ribs. So now I'm going to get down there. I'm going to push I'm going to water the pot first, like little and often. I'm going to push that knuckle in, and I'm pushing slightly out. And now I'm ready. I'm going to lift. You've got to be trying to lift evenly, so the walls of your pot are even. They always get a bit thin towards the top generally. Then I'm going to collar it in. My thumb's just come out to help me collar it in there, look. Leave it a little thicker at the top than you think you need. Each time you do a lift or whatever, slow down that wheel speed a little bit. I'm looking inside at the circle, taking the water out, because I'm a bit obsessive about taking the water out, because I'm going to apply more water. So I'm now looking at the circle at the bottom of my pot to decide how wide the walls are here, and they're really wide. So now I'm going to push out into this rib water. So the base is too narrow, so I'm pushing out into the rib, because what you want with almost every throw, if you're doing something like this, is as straight and as even a cylinder as possible. I'm going to let that curve in a bit, because it's going to have a narrow neck in the end. It's probably going to start wobbling here, because it always does when I do these sort of shapes. Again, I'm going to push it out again. Hold on, catching my fingers because I didn't apply any water. If you forget the water, you've just got to relax the pressure against your fingertips against the clay, so you can get away with it a little bit better. So by the time I've got that, my second love is music, my first love is football, but I was never good enough to be a professional footballer, even though it took me a long time to give up on that dream. When I was 40, I kept thinking I could get a bit of a pack on my back, go and run a few hills. I was never that dedicated, to be honest. You've got to be top 1% of kids in all schools of the country. Even that probably is too big a number. The amount of kids that go into football academies and get released, even though they're brilliant. I think if you weren't playing for the county at my age group when I was at school, you probably weren't good enough, really. But yeah, I really love football. And then music was my second love, and pottery's my third, really. Music, I got into music. I always loved music from an early age. I started playing when I was 19, which is quite late, really. Bought a guitar when I was £30. It cost me from West Brom Music High Street shop. I saw a kid going to junior school with an acoustic guitar. He was getting taught, and I was always a little fascinated. What's he doing? Why has he got that guitar, and who's teaching him? And I never asked if I could. I think he was maybe a slightly problem kid that they were trying to find something to engage him at the school with. Music, it's punk stuff, so 70s, late 70s, that's when I really, before that, you know, it was more like Bee Gees and ELO and God knows what. Bob Marley I liked a lot, but by the time I really got into it, it was like kind of the Specials. That's the first record I ever bought, was Gangsters by the Specials. And then things like The Clash, Pistols, Stiff Little Fingers, The Ruts, Joy Division. Then after that came sort of My Bloody Valentine, Loop, Pixies, Sonic Youth. Then I like drum and bass a lot. So I like some of the rave stuff in drum and bass and trance, but I always wanted to hear guitars on everything. And a lot of that, certainly in the early days before Prodigy, I'm going to squeeze that bottom in because I don't need that bottom to be quite so wide. So look, that's thicker now. I'm going to squeeze the top in, just need enough. I can already feel this is getting a bit weak, so we'll see what happens when I get a bit nearer, because now I need the shape at some point to come out and bowed round. So if I push, I'm going to slow the wheel speed down a bit more. I'm going to do one more knuckle lift and I'm going to shape it, and we'll see how we go, because like I said to you, this is buff reclaimed clay, which is not the best really to throw any kind of moon jar or bulbous shapes with. Yeah, it's a little bit thin down there now. So I'm pushing out as I'm lifting up, which is why it's coming out, and then when I get to the top of the shoulder, which I'm going to say is there, I'm going to leave my inside fingers here, and I'm going to carry on with the outside fingertips, and it'll push that top section back in. They say you should always concentrate on this curve. Where you're going to curve it in, yeah, that is pretty thin. I'll be lucky to get away with that, but we'll see, because I'm going to bow out the bottom now. So bowing out, so now I'm going to get really slow in a minute, I think. Here we go, slow that speed down a bit more. There it goes. Put the rib against the base, push against the rib. Oh, there's a lump in the clay as well. That's not going to help. So now I'm feeling that. I'm going back down with my fingertips and seeing how it's moving. Pottery is now my day job, if you call it a day job, because I do it at night mainly. I do it in the afternoon. It suits my musicians kind of living at night. I've always been a night owl, so it's really handy that I've got a job that works at night or isn't like early morning. Thing that I bought, then I would put some original music on it, because I worked a bit too quick there. Look, if you work too quick and you don't pay attention, this is what happens. But if you slow the wheel speed even more and just gently coax it back in with some kind of rib, I'm going to push it out. Actually, there you go, I forgot the water, because I've just felt that it's too dry down there. So I'm going to push that bottom section out here against this rib. The more you push it out, the more dangerous you're getting of the whole thing collapsing. There it goes. But for a new-do drum, you need this bend, this curve in the clay, because that's what gives you the sound, I think. Gives it the resonance. So that's now into the neck there. Yeah, that's not too bad, that curve there, and I've got plenty. Yeah, the bass isn't too narrow on the inside. So now I've just got to push that neck in, collar that neck in, because I think before I do that, the last thing I'm going to do is just check with my fingertips either side of the clay just how thick it is, because you don't want to leave it too thick because it's a bit more difficult to turn the excess clay off, because this is the first section, is the actual throwing of the shape. Then it's going to dry, and then I'm going to trim it, as they call it, or turn it, we say in English. Americans generally say trim, which makes more sense to me. All these things, and film I like a lot. I like making, editing on film and creating clips of different things, like normally any kind of psychedelics, like, I don't know, oil on water or anything. And then all of these things, that's going all a bit wobbly now. All these things can work together. I'm now touching the clay very gently inside because I haven't applied any water and it's actually sticking to my fingertips. So there's that shoulder bit I was talking about, so we'll see. I'm going to leave, it really annoys me if there's any wobbles, so I'm always looking at the side of the pot. Micro wobbles, as I call them, are okay, because in the next stage you can trim it to perfection, and if you stop that wheel you don't see them. So I've got the kind of brain that obsesses about things, so certainly when it's doing that, so I have big trouble. But sometimes you have to be a little bit forgiving and just think it's okay, just deal, it's not going to affect the sound of the drum if it's very slightly wobbly. So all I'm doing is bringing in the top now. I'm using this kind of collaring shape, look, like that. See, a lot of people on the internet, they do this business which is better control. When you're turning a pot, and the speed of things, when you're turning, you can center by using your fingertip here, and so you can see that's like touching and it gaps. So I always teach my students, like, it's touch, and then you stop it on the touch and then you push it towards the middle of the wheel. So rhythm and counting is very handy for recentering a pot when you're turning it.
This is a song written in COVID, lyrics by my good friend Peter Reeve, classic writer, sadly no longer with us. There's a memorial event again at the station this year on his birthday, 16th of June. If you can make it, the more the merrier, as always. Keep your distance. Streets of pain and sorrow, no more will be tomorrow. On the scented breeze I drift, waiting for the final lift. Keep your distance if you play. Kill me just one step. Hide away in isolation as I read this foundation. Paranoia is my mask. Death is my task. Keep your distance if you play, or I can kill with just one step. Keep your distance if you play. kill, we just want to stay.
I've always written what I was too embarrassed to call them poems when I was younger, when I was at secondary school, so I used to call them ditties because I didn't say I was a poet. It just sounded a bit too pretentious. But see, there you go, that's what I'm talking about, this neck here. I don't really like that shape now. I've lost some of the curve in that shape, so now I'm going to try and I've got to go back in. This is where it might collapse, but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day because it's only clay. I'm pushing it in with the kidney to try and curve it back in to this rounded shape that I'm after, because I didn't like the shape of it. And that's what I was saying about the neck. If that neck isn't dealt with properly in the early stages, I'm tempted to try and push it out here as well to get more of a bowing, but I know if I do that it's going to, well, let's give it a go, because like I just said, it's only clay. This clay doesn't like it. I should have used better clay really. Here we go, watch what's happening now at the neck. See, it's trying to drop down there. That's what I was talking about. When it happens like that, if you're quick enough, you can lift it up again. Constantly, it's getting worse by the minute. Hold on, let's slow the wheel speed. I might just wire this one up and have a little look. And that's much nicer. That's more of a shape I'm thinking with a drum. I'd like it a bit wider down here. I'm a bit scared to do it, but I'm going in with the kidney this time because the kidney will dry it up on the inside. So if I'm gentle and I can get down there, I'm looking at where I'm touching it. There, I'm down at that bit now, I think. I push the kidney against it and look, it just pushes that section out a tad. I come back up with the kidney. I'm looking at the form on the outside here. You shouldn't be one-handed. You should be like that ideally if you're learning. But the more you do potting, now it's too wide, look. This is the trouble when you're throwing. You're always messing and tinkering and is it good? Do I like it? I love it for that because it's just fun. Like I said, it's only clay. So, you know, the worst thing that can happen is it just collapses on you and you've got to throw another one. So that's nice enough now, but now I've got to deal with that neck. It's got to be narrower and it's not going to want me to do this at all. So we recorded twice, well, we've just recorded again at Cap Arts in Kings Norton, by the Trading Estate or whatever it's called, by the Tower of Song. Bloke called Matt engineered it. He did a really good job actually, because the first recording we ever did, we did at Bob Lamb's old studios just past actually. He's a famous producer who did UB40 and Duran Duran. Unfortunately he'd moved to Thailand by the time we got there, but that was analogue recording. So on tape, like, I always wanted to do a bit of analogue because I perceive it to be more warm. So we did that there. That came out all right, but I never really, then I took it home to mix. And music's so difficult because, again, you can get so fussy with it. And you're after something that you're hearing in your head, but you don't know how to get it like that on tape kind of thing. So with mixing, and there's so many frequencies and each instrument has a different frequency. You got to mix them all together. I'm always having trouble with my vocals. I don't like them. I want to put more effect on them to make it sound better. Same with the guitar. I've always got like bits of problems with buzzing and bad old tatty cheap gear that I've got really. But you do the best you can, and I think coming from punk, it's more about spirit. It's not about being too prissy with everything. Yeah, it's all about the energy and what you're saying with your music without being too pretentious about that. I did have a phrase called, people would say, what kind of music do you play? And I'd be like, I don't know what it's called. It's a mixture of all sorts of stuff. First band I had, we were joking saying it was punk rock hippie dread all stars. We were calling ourselves, because trying to find a name for a band it's so hard. My first band in London was called Hole with a W, like not the Courtney Love Hole with a W, Hole with a W, which was quite nice because that's complete. And then we were trying to make this kind of anagram or whatever you call it, world have one last evolution, or and after that it was like people would say something, I'd say, well, it's punk rock hippie dread, or it's like I had a phrase at one point, a tribal psychopathic music I called it for some reason. And always looking for a description. It's really difficult to have that. That might do, apart from I don't like this bit now. I wanted it more, the neck's thin enough, I've got away with that. This, I want more like that. So now I'm going to have to try and go in with the fingertips. Underneath there, I'm going to have to try and lift that section up, and that's where that neck bit is. That wasn't very happy like that. Fingertip down there, look, you can see it's starting to try and break and then relax very slowly into the middle. There we go, that's a little nicer. And if I do the same with the other hand and the rib, I might just get away with it. And then where I'm at with my throwing, it's always the same. You think you've done a really good job, and then you take it off, you come to turn it, and it's well too heavy. And that's because I've never wired up. You're supposed to wire up. I mean, Austin Gannon, who does our intermediate pottery, does all those big pots on the top. He's a bit of a master thrower. He's always going on about his students. They just wire up their pots. And it's true. In fact, that's the shape. Let's do it, because I call myself a sentimental potter. Almost every single pot I've ever made, I've kept. I'm not overly keen on that shape for a drum. It's all a little bit stumpy. Yeah, it's not what I'm after. More of a teardrop, so it's got to be more rounded at the bottom, and then more of a longer neck like that. So this is what you're supposed to do. People get horrified by it, but it's only clay. You flip it up like that, it falls apart, and then you get to see your profile. So look, the base I quite like thickish because you put a foot in it generally. You can see from the sides there, it's a little bit too thin for this clay. That's why it was complaining up here, as I call it. So look, it's all a little bit too thin. So I was trying to push too much height and too much. The more you push out, the thinner it gets. So, but that's easy to wedge up if you want to do another one. And I'm just going to keep practicing because I want an hoodoo drum that's a good twice as big as that. I could do things on a smaller level really easy now because I've been throwing long enough. So, for example, if I do a quick, I'll show you the same sort of shape with much less clay. So if I plonk that on there like that, so it's all about the learning how you throw different amounts of clay. So this type of size, for example, a couple of quick cones. So first band was Hole in London, then I had a period of travelling and kind of busking and playing on the street and not really having anything. Playing solo a little bit, open mics. I did, when I was travelling in France and Spain, I did get gigs in my own right, but you had to play cover versions, so that's the first time I ever learnt any cover versions, because you've got to do an hour and a half, 3/4 of an hour sets. Yeah, people want to hear something they know, basically. I only ever used to play my own stuff originally, and even busking. We used to busk originals when I played with other people. That's how I started to learn to play in front of people a bit easier, when I was busking. And then in France, I'd actually get paid to play. That was lovely. It's a bit like getting paid to teach pottery. Such a lovely thing that you've got to love, that someone's actually going to pay you to work with that thing that you love doing. So it's so lovely for that to happen. And so yeah, I was busking, I was travelling around, I didn't do a lot, and then when I came back to Birmingham, I met a bloke called Peter Reeve, who was doing like an open mic, kind of, not really open mic, it was signed acts, but they weren't getting paid, and it was like easy going down at the Market Tavern. I got on really well with him, lovely bloke, he's passed now, but really, because you came and filmed his memorial, didn't you? And we talked about getting a band together, and so that's where Cosmic Jerks started. Cosmic Jerks have been going a long time now. We did have an 8-piece band, so me, Pete, Tony Soundman was going to be drummer at one point. Then we got, we were a 4-piece, Danny Gallagher, Skinny used to play bass, then we got Mickey Berg coming on guitar. Then they all kind of left. There was still me and Pete. Kath was there, Pete's partner. She used to play djembe. She still plays with us now, off and on. She's having a bit of a break at the moment. Ever since Pete passed, it's not been the same for all of us, to be honest. Before that, our keyboard player Ralph Ralph Cook passed. So then a couple of bands that we did have an 8-piece, like I said. That was the best it was ever. We had a saxophone player, Paul Shirley. We had guitarists, Martin Vernon, who used to also play fiddle. It was the best at that point. We did do a recording at that point, but unfortunately we recorded somewhere where the bloke who was recording it was a little bit off his head, and all the tracks, well, a few of the tracks, not all of them, were bleeding quite badly. We were recording live, all in the same room, to be fair to him, but there were a couple of mistakes where the keyboard wasn't working properly, the lead, and we didn't notice. So when I've come to mix it, I have to find the bits where it's working properly and not have the bits where it's not working properly, and it took me a long time to mix that. So that's called Event Horizon. The first one was called Blood Supermoon, the one at Bob Lamb's studio. I've got them recorded, but I'm not very happy with the actual way that they sound altogether. I mean, they're not bad. Again, this is the trouble with being a bit of a perfectionist. Lots of people really like it, but if I was going to sell it, which I'm not really bothered about, I'm going to try and get some copies and give them away, because it's better that people hear you, because you're not going to get any global superstardom at our ages. That was never going to happen anyway. I think you need a bit more of an ego to get to that point, and a bit more luck, and maybe a bit more talent, I don't know. But certainly when we were at 8-piece, for me, we were making the best type of music, because it was just so interesting. Have I missed any? Trev was on drums there. Trevor Ellis was on drums at that point. Who else am I missing? Paul, Trevor, Ralph, Pete, me, Kath, Pete Bass, my bass player, who's still with us now. Pete Luffman, he was on bass at that point and still is. So yeah, we've just done a new recording at this Cap Arcs place. So I'm quite excited about that, apart from the fact we've got to overdub everything at the moment, because we recorded without our pedals, so it was just dry, and Matt just gave us a couple of amp simulators to work with. Yeah, I'm going to mix it myself, because I'm a control freak. I wouldn't mind someone mixing it and giving it a go, because it might help me not mix it, because nothing's right. And it takes so long, it's so hard to do it, you know, depending on what you're after. I guess I don't know what I'm after, that's part of the problem. But Matt said he told us how much he charged per track, and it was a lot of money, so can't afford that. And mainly because it takes so long. He knows how long it takes, so that's why it costs so much. And I like doing that. I've done sound engineering. I've done 2 courses or 3 courses. I've got a City and Guilds in sound engineering. I did a music technology, whatever it was called, BTEC at South Birmingham College with Nick Wells and other tutors. He's a local drum and bass DJ. He was really good, really brilliant at showing us how to use sequencers and whatever. He was showing us how to make sounds with modules and like fake sounds, like a fake snare drum or whatever, using sine waves or whatever, you know. So that was quite fascinating. And then there were other parts of the course that was like mixing and using the desk. And then you got to do some recording as well, which was really good. So that was my first sort of goes at kind of semi-professional recording, I guess, in a sense. Yeah, that was great. I really liked doing that. Unfortunately, my dad passed away at the same time as I was on that course, so it was a little bit difficult. Just towards the end of it, and I was also a dinner lady at that point, as I call it, at the local school up the road. I was looking after the kids at dinner time. Lunchtime supervisor, they call it. But I like the idea of being a dinner lady for some weird reason. They used to call me Miss, the kids, because there wasn't any blokes doing it. I was the only bloke, and I only did it because my son he said, "Why don't you come and work here, Dad? They want some dinner ladies." I said, "Would you like me to work there?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, I'll give it a go," because I was unemployed. And I never thought they'd have me working in school, because I'm not really, I'm more like one of the kids, trying to behave myself and not do stupid walks down the corridors or entertaining the kids. But in the playground, they're all manic, so as long as you're looking after them and you care, then they all like you. And they did with me. I used to do football. I did after school football with them. I did homework clubs. I was doing an art group, getting them to do all these paintings and just enjoy themselves after school. I'm off in my own world now. I've forgotten what I was doing. I like these bottle jars with slightly longish necks. Look, it's too chunky. So here we go again. You've got to keep looking. It's a bit like painting. I find the same with painting when I'm painting. People say, "Oh, why did you mess that one up? Why you keep working on that?" Because I know it's not finished, and I'm looking for something that I perceive to be finished. Like, that's nicer than it was. And then I'm going to flare the top out just a little bit, look. So that's going up like that. If I stop there, put my fingertip here and just gently bring it out. Compress, and then I've got to pin it because I'm noticing it's doing that a little bit and it annoys me. So pin the top off. Whoop, watch it go. Nearly go up. I didn't add any water, so I was being lazy. That's what I should have done. Then I wouldn't have got into as much trouble. It's still trying to break a little bit because it's a narrow neck. Look, there you go. So you've got to be very careful. I've run out of water as well as everything. When you're touching, easy. This type of shape, bring it out a little bit. And this is where I'm thinking these days I could do with having my glasses on. I'm in denial still. Dry up all the slush on the outside. I can even push that kidney the other way into that neck to make a nice little bend. And bring it up. Better off when you're compressing against something. There we go, that'll do it. Take the slush off. I like using the kidney, it's my favourite tool, the metal kidney. And then this sort of size and this shape, if it's too heavy, you can just turn off the excess in the next stage. Sometimes I used to mess like with the kidney, like I'll do that, and then I might end up doing something like that. Make a little bit of a funky, you can do that in the turning stage, if it's thick enough. I'm going to take that water off with a sponge, it's easier. So I'm just going to trim the base of this. So I do what I call a little bit of wet turning. When I get there, I could take that point, this is where I should have my glasses on. I push down at the base. Now the more you do that, the more it starts wobbling. Look, that's the trouble. And I don't really have to do this, but again, I'm also whizzing around too fast. So look, if I do that and it starts going too wobbly, I can mix some more of this water, or it's now more like slurry. Then I can use that for the last bit. I can push it back in with my whale's tail shape, like that. Now I've dried the clay up, I've got to remember I've done that and re-water it, because again I'm a little bit obsessive with having it all perfectly centered. Like, that's good. And then you get to a point you go, just stop. You know, at some point you do have to finish what you're doing and stop messing around with it. Because like I said, that's just the first step. First step is the basic shape. And then you refine that shape with the trimming or the turning. Then you're going to put it into a kiln, or I've got to colour it. I'm going to start colouring it with slips and oxides. Then you put it in the kiln. It gets bisque fired to 1,000 degrees. Comes out that kiln. It goes into a glazed bucket. Dip it in a glazed bucket, or 2 glazes, or whatever you're doing. Back in the kiln, up to 1240, which overfires to 1280 in our kiln, roughly. That's what we're aiming for, 1280 or 1300, 1280 technically. And then it's all done, and hallelujah for pottery, because I'd be nuts without pottery, because it's the only thing I ever finish. Because once you've come out of the kiln, you can re-glaze it, unfortunately, because I will do that on occasions, if you really don't like the glaze effect. But generally, music, painting, filmmaking, photography is a bit different. All of the other disciplines, you can always tweak. There's always something, oh, I'm missing that, or it needs a bit more of that. Ceramics, once it's come out like that, these are mine up here and up at the top. You really, oh, that looks dangerous. You're really not going to change it, really. So it's great for that. It limits you, is what I'm trying to say. So now I've just got to take that off. I think with these shapes, if your hands are dry, you can just pick them up like that. But you've got to put it on something. I can see what it will be. So the base will be half as wide as that by the time. So the curve of the base will be more like that one. Like that. So you can see it's not quite the same shape, but there's that sort of shape. So it'd be like that. That's the idea. So you turn it upside down, you make a little foot in it, and then that's finished. I might re-glaze this one just round here, because this bit, you've got to be careful, because some people go, oh, I love that bit. And just because you don't like it, if you're selling your wares, lots of other people love the thing you don't like. So, yeah, I don't know, but if you're creating, you're after what you're after. So no one can tell you you're wrong. If you don't like something you've created, it's your job to, if you can, change it and make it right. Like I'm saying about my paintings. Oh, why are you messing with that? Because it's not finished. Oh, I liked it like that better. Well, you paint your own painting, make your own pot. I'm going to go for whatever I'm thinking I'm going for. But yeah, love it. I don't love the tidying up of it particularly. But there you go.
Don't
I'm going to make a nice, decent bowl with this. So, because I really like bowls. Bowls are quite easy, really, because centrifugally, they want to come out with the wheel speed. Even if it's slower, you push on the inside shape, and it's going to come out, and it will come out into a bowl generally. So, it's been a while since I've done a nice, decent sized bowl. So I'll take off the water and the excess clay with my nail like that, and you get loads of spirals. So it's another reason I love throwing. It's very hypnotic. In fact, I don't think I want... Bigger stuff is harder to sell sometimes, or harder to use in your house unless you're needing like a big, which I don't make bread or cakes or anything. So this size here will give me, my son wants a big bowl, I think, because he broke his last one I made him, and he has loads of very healthy, he has his oats and his goji berries or whatever, makes a really lovely breakfast for himself, and he needs a big bowl because he's like not a bodybuilder, but a friend of mine bought me some from his allotment. He was digging away, John Bembo, he's passed as well unfortunately, but he bought me some of his allotment clay in a couple of plastic bags and said, oh, have a go with this stuff if you want. Well, he did ask me first. I said, yeah, bring it in, I'll have a go with it. I'll see whether it fires to the temperature we fire to. It might melt in the kiln. So I took a little ball of it, I put it into our kiln, our glaze firing in a pot. Found out it didn't melt, so I knew I could have a go with it. Made a few pots with it. It was, I refined it. So he brought it to me, had all the stones in and everything. I put it into a big bucket of water. Then I sieved it too well, and then found out you're supposed to leave some of the smaller particles in, but it was I've got to say, it's probably the nicest clay I've ever thrown with, from a Birmingham allotment. Came out kind of a black colour. Yeah, it was really lovely. So yeah, if I was somewhere, my dream is to have my own pottery in somewhere where I can see the sea or mountains or both. You know, I want it all really, but it's a dream. And ideally, that's exactly what you do. You dig your own clay from your back garden, you'd process it, you'd throw with that, make your own glazes. Glazes, you just get the materials, so it's you need like a glaze former, like a glass, so that's like quartz. You've got opacifiers, you've got stabilizers, things that you've got fluxes, so things that make the things move and blend, things that stabilize. And there's all different, I love it. I mean, I've never liked chemistry so much in my life, to be honest. We did a course here a few years back with a bloke called Matt Katz, who's very well known on the internet. He was brilliant. I learnt so much in that week. All these different oxides and whatever you can, colorants you put in the glaze. So you've got a base glaze that you make, which is basically glass. If you think of it, it's like, the way people have described it, it's like a liquid honey. If you think of a liquid honey flowing down your piece of pottery, and then the kiln gets turned off, and then it contracts, and then and it leaves a layer of glass across your pot, and that's what makes it hygienic. But yeah, glazes are fascinating. And also, I'd like to do more of that, because then you're creating your own unique thing. If you create your own glazes, I create my own thing from combining the glazes that we have at Sundragon, or I've done over the years anyway. I've taken every glaze bucket that we've ever had, ish and combined it with every other glaze, and then you can create some quite amazing effects. So that's what I'm interested in. I don't like flat glazes, I like what's called phase separation. I want to be somewhere, I call it my out plan when I retire. I mean, I've had my retirement from the age of 16 to 30. I said that to people. I travelled and I lived whatever. And then I said, oh, I'm going to work till I drop now, because I've had my, not idle years, they weren't idle, but when I didn't work properly or at all, I couldn't find anything I wanted to do basically, and I wasn't going to go and just do any job, because that's what makes you mentally ill. If you hate what you're doing and you can't handle whatever, you're not going to be well. So you've got to find something you want to do, I think, or you've got to live in a completely different way. So I'd like to just be somewhere where I can make pots, maybe even carry on teaching people how to make pots, like people who come and self-catering or whatever, and I'd have my studio with my wheels and whatever, and people would drop in and teach them how to make pots. And then either have somewhere, like when you relax on the night, you can just, you know, people who play music can bring their instruments and you have a jam together, or near enough to a town where you can just carry on playing music to people, because I really like playing music live with a band, even when all solo. It's one of the most pleasing things to play music to people who really love what you do. You know, if they like your voice, or they like your guitaring, or they like the songs that you write or covers that you play, it's a really lovely thing. It's very nice. And we'll just collar that in, because I'm now going to lift it up and out. In fact, I'm looking at the base, so I'm going to collar in the base as well, because I want the base to be narrower on the inside. Now I'm going to push it up and out into what I call a V-shape planter. So it goes, my fingertip instead of the sponge goes at the side there. I push against that fingertip from the inside and I lift. My God, this bowl's going to be too big for him, possibly. Although he does eat big portions. He's 21, but he's still a growing lad, I guess. I'm drawing out the water. Now I'm going to get back to my kidney. Push it out with my fingertips into my kidney. Should have slowed the wheel a bit more. Get to that point, pause, compress, and then all I'm bothered about really is the inside shape. So I'm going to use my kidney on the inside like that, which dries up the clay and it bends the clay. I can go all the way to the middle if I've left enough of a base, which I have done. And then I'm going to make it nicer on the inside by using the kidney like that. I can bring it up and out and make a bigger, wider bowl. And at any given moment, if I don't like the shape of it, I can go back in and modify it with this whale's tail shape, like that. Relax the spring back. The clay springs back when you push against it. So if I push against that and release, you get that. If you push against it and then kind of breathe, pause and relax the spring before you release the clay, then it behaves itself. Again, I've got to decide when I'm stopping. It's well chunky on the outside. Really doesn't matter about the outside shape if you like turning, trimming the clay, which I do. If I like the top to come in, I can leave my inside fingertip there and carry on with the kidney and it'll bend back over the top like that. If I don't want that, I've released too quick, look. I can push it out again. Now, is that too wide? Is it good for him? That looks all right because he likes his minced beef, and I'm a vegetarian, but he's never been brought up to be a vegetarian. So he that's nice and wide for him if he has his, whatever he has, pasta. The fact that it's ugly on the outside is irrelevant. Like, you don't really want to throw, certainly when you've got a narrow base like I've got inside here, it's curving. I like these kind of U-shaped bowls. I don't like what I call the cat bowl or whatever, where it comes that flat and then it does a bowl at the side. I like things to curve in and then have quite a narrow foot, certainly on the inside. So that'll do, I think. I'm just going to take off a little bit of the slurry. And then the rest of the outside shape is in the next stage where, excuse me, we take the pot off, we flip it upside down, so that shape there, rather than looking all chunky at the bottom, becomes more like that one, which is mine, so I can pick it up with dirty hands if I want to. Like that, so you put your foot in again, so that base will be, this pot will look like a bigger version of that. And I do all this chattering, that's my unique selling point, I guess. For years I've always used the metal kidney. So everything, almost everything I do has a chatter effect on it. Not always, but you know. So to take bowls off, certainly if they're thin, I always teach my students this little trick. So you can make sure the top is perfectly symmetrical. I'm always looking at 3 o'clock and flat, which it is. Stop the wheel. And then the little trick is to take a piece of paper, newspaper. This has been wet, so it's all, normally it's better when it hasn't been in any kind of water. Whoops. If I take that much, you put a little hat on it. This is where I don't want those creases ideally, but whatever. Like that. It shows you the rim, you work around the rim, it creates a tension in the rim, and if you've got a thin bowl especially, when you push against it, instead of being perfectly symmetrical, which that, like, I like full moons and full circles, I've always liked circle shapes. You can cut around it, and when you push against it, it doesn't go oval. So a lot of the time, certainly if you use your palm, you push against a bowl that is thin, it will come off the wheel. As soon as you push against it, it will come off the wheel and it will be misshapen. So if you do this little trick, you get away with it. Well, you don't use your palm for starters. You're going to see in a minute, I'm going to use my pincers, as I call them. So I'm cutting around that paper. So a lot of the production potters on the internet would never do this because they're just, some people don't obsess about the total symmetry of a pot, and I can understand why, because it's not really, you know, if you're eating off something every day or you're making 500 of them, you don't need to do what I do. But I'm not a production thrower. Every pot I do is individual, really. That's what I'm interested in, is the individuality of the pot. I'm not really trying to make, because I'm not a professional in terms of, it's not my only business is selling pots because I'm a tutor. I get the luxury of being paid to teach something I love and then make whatever I like when I can get round to getting on the wheel. So I'm just taking the skirt off the bottom of the pot, it's called, and then pushing the point of the pointy stick underneath, which allows me to get the water and the wire. That's one out of my box. It's made from fishing wire, slightly thicker, and obviously it's much less, it's not as long, so students don't get into trouble. There you go, look, it's moved. So once it wants to aquaplane, by pushing with my fingertips like that, it will come off nice. So I send it round to 7 o'clock. I get myself a tile, so I'm going to push this one off onto a tile rather than pick it up. Like I was saying, production potters, maybe not something that size, but they probably would do. They lift off they just put their hand underneath it and lift it off the wheel. And then when you put it back down again, quite often it re-rounds itself. So, but I never rush. I take my time because I've got the luxury to do that. I don't have to make 500 pots a day and sell them all or whatever. Now I'm going to wet the tile because otherwise it will stick to the paper when it wants to go onto the tile. Everyone's throws on bats these days. They've got these little bat systems that you see on the internet, but they cost money and we haven't got them in this room. So we're a bit old school. We take a tile, find 7 o'clock with my fingertip. So let's get that away first. 7 o'clock, I plonk the tile under the fingertip like that. While I'm there, I bring my thigh in and I clamp it into the back of my hand like that. So now that tile is not going anywhere. That allows me to take my pincers, push, and I'm into the middle of the tile. And then that will just flip off. So there's the bowl in the bottle jar. The only other thing I've ever showed people is the cylinder, which is, I never got very interested in cylinders. Moon jars and bottle jars, so anything like that with a bit of a neck, or like these massive, you know, the rounded shapes. I'm obsessed with this, like this, that's one of mine. I'm the smaller version. I started doing a lot of planters at one point because I was trying to make a plant pot big enough to put this cheese plant in, and I kept making them what I thought was big enough for that plastic to go inside. It's not quite big enough, that one. And then when they come out the kiln, they generally shrink by about 10%. So I kept doing stuff and it'd shrink and it wouldn't fit in. It wouldn't hide I'm trying to hide the plastic. I can still see it. People were saying, just cut it off. I'm like, that's not the point. I'm trying to make a big enough planter where I'm going to do a cylinder now just for the fun of it, because I was trying to do a planter to fit that in, not to trim off the plastic. And anything like that, it's a challenge. So when I started doing those planters, I couldn't throw that big at all. So I was having big trouble every time I come to make one. And from throwing those type of shapes now, I've got a lot better at throwing larger amounts of clay. I won't say large because there's people on the internet that are throwing ridiculously big amounts of clay. In Birmingham, it's really difficult to get gigs, I find. I guess these days, since COVID, I think it's not got any better, for sure. A lot of places for the last, I don't know, decade have been obsessed with covers, you know, tribute bands. Some of them are really good, but, you know, tribute or covers bands rather than, I don't like people who try and look like the people they're trying to play. You know, I like tribute bands that play the music, you can recognise it, but they put their own little twist on it. I mean, that's what I do. If I'm doing a cover, I don't try and copy it exactly. I try and get the essence of the cover, and then you put your own spin on it somehow. Normally faster, I play them, normally. But my band mostly play at the station, it seems. Sunday Express, which is it's been going a long time now. It was made initially for poets to perform, because poets, if you think it's hard enough getting a gig as a musician, try being a poet and getting a gig. The people who run the nights, it's an all-day event normally. Used to be someone called Big Bren. He's passed as well. He's like the poet. Yeah. He was quite well known because he got quite an interesting delivery style where when I first saw him, he was so nervous and he spoke so quickly you couldn't actually hear what he was really saying, and a lot of people used to sort of laugh at him, think he was a bit ridiculous. But if you ever heard what he was actually saying, it was brilliant. I mean, he got so many good poems. He got a famous one called Shopping, Shopping, Shopping. Another one called Ill, which was all about, you know, when you're not feeling well, you go to the chemist, you buy something or the doctor gives you a prescription, and then on the inside there's always a sheet of paper, isn't there, telling you, you know, the side effects or possible side effects, and he just lists all these side effects, and then in the end he's got on one of these, and in very rare occasions, sometimes death. You know, he was a funny, very good observer of human nature, and yeah, his delivery was fast, but the more you heard him, the more you got used to. There is still, I love shopping, but there's still a couple of lines in it, because I've never seen it printed out anywhere, where I still don't know what he was saying. But I guess that makes it a little bit more interesting sometimes. It's a bit like bands when you don't actually know all the lyrics to the song. You make them up in your own head, and then you find out that you've been singing it wrong for years. And it's sort of entertaining in a way. It's not right, obviously. You should know what the lyrics are if you love a band, what they're singing about. Could be singing about anything if you don't pay attention. Yeah, so Jimmy Fantastic, I call him. What's his proper name? James. Oh, I've just texted him today as well. I forgot his surname now. And some Matt Ricardo is the other bloke. They're both poets. But they put music on as well. It's like an open mic for poets and musicians. Pete, before he passed, he wanted us to get like, I don't know, 50, 100 done of the first recording, Blood Supermoon. But I listened back to that now, and I really don't like some of the vocals on it. That I haven't mixed it enough, because you mix and then you can't really hear what you're doing because you spend so long mixing. It's true, you need to like leave it a week or a month, come back to it, and then you've got fresh ears, and I didn't quite get round to doing that. So I now want to remix it, especially now he's passed. I want a really nice, because he used to sing some of the tunes. He had a very annoying, brilliant habit of, I'd have a riff, an idea, we'd be playing it, jamming it out at my house in the old days. We used to rehearse at my house. And then he'd just stick a whole song on it, because he had so many lyrics from years in the past. And then it becomes that song. I've got tunes that I've written where he put a lyric on that I can't imagine having a different lyric on now, and he used to sing them. So I've either got to learn to sing them, but they're his tunes, so it's different when you're singing someone else's lyrics. I mean, it's not impossible, but I back and sing his songs, so I learnt his lyrics, and I'd have to choose where I thought I should come in, where I would add to it. He did that a little bit with my songs, but annoyingly, again, he never really learnt my lyrics. Obviously, well, I guess he wasn't so bothered, apart from songs that had an obvious chorus or I don't know, where he felt like he wanted to sing, I guess. I mean, I never told him, you know, learn the lyrics and sing this bit. So it's instinctive like that. You either do or you don't. You either feel it and want to join in there, but he was busy playing his tambourine a lot of time. I never realised the tambourine was such a great instrument until I met him. I just thought tambourine, it's a kind of kid's instrument, or that's the kind of thing you play at school when you can't play anything else. And the way he used to play it, wow, it was so good. It was like he could manipulate the tempo of the band and the songs we were singing by the way he played his tambourine. So if he started hitting it a bit harder or moving it a bit faster, he could energise the band, because a tambourine is such a weird instrument. Even I've seen punk rock gigs or whatever, where someone's playing a tambourine somewhere or in the band, and they're playing like ridiculously noisy music, but boy, can you hear that tambourine. It cuts through, you know, sonically, the timbre, I want to say, what's the word I'm after? I'm after, you know, the frequency. It's the treble frequency of the tambourine. cuts through completely. So I'm just making sure this has got thin enough walls. Then if I want my perfect cylinder, I can just use a rib. So at the moment it's all enclosed at the top, look. So I'm looking down there, the width of the base internally is pretty much the same as it at the top. And so now if I want it to be equal, because the idea we always say everything comes from the cylinder. So if you learn mastery of cylinders, you can then apply that to different shapes. So I always do this. You want it to be the same thickness, and you want that to be a right angle, ideally, if you're doing a classic cylinder. So if I hold this rib against the outside, push gently against it and lift, when I get to the top, it will start pushing out, and if it hits the rib, it will be a cylinder. And I'll look at the profile. So I'm always doing this, leaning back. And then I'm going to take the long rib out of my box. This is my student boxes. I make these boxes up because they've got all the tools that you need in. A big rib, a small rib, a metal kidney, which is over here somewhere in the slush. Big rib, small rib, metal kidney, wire, needle tool or a pin on the stick, and a pointy stick. That is good for everything really until you get to bigger sizes of clay. So now I'm just using this big rib on the outside just to straighten up that cylinder. Again, I'm looking at the profile, and if I want it really straight, I look at the profile, I push that corner edge in, and when I perceive it, I go up. If it becomes a gap, I just push against that gap with my fingertips gently like that. And again, you can tell yourself, like, don't obsess too much, because no one's going to notice it's not absolutely bang on. And you've got turning to do yet, where you can turn it into a straighter sided kidney, but I can't help it because I've got that kind of brain that semi-obsesses about perfection. But you don't want to beat yourself up too much about it. I'm a walking contradiction. That's wobbling at the top now. It's getting too thin because I'm messing around too much. I'm going to use a bit of sponge for a change. Like that. So that's what I'm talking about, the inside circle. I can perceive it's got a very slight curve in it. I could, well, now I've spotted that, I'm going to push it down because it's annoying me now. You want the base of your cylinder to be totally flat because it's a cylinder. If it's a bowl, it's got a curve, generally. I like everything completely flat and level. There we go, that's nice enough. And there. That'll do. Yeah, I've been making containers for all the tools. Gives me practice on the wheel, and then I don't have to pay for the clay, because I pay for the clay when I'm making my own stuff. The firings, I don't pay when I'm making for the pottery, obviously. And it gives me a bit of practice. So I could show you turning if you want, because I've got to do one of these. Turning is trimming the clay. So you're taking the basic form that you've made, and you haven't made it too thin and too light, because if you try to do that generally, there's no point. You might as well. I like turning, so I don't mind leaving a pot a little thick, because I like to trim the clay off. Turn the clay off, as we say in English.
This one's for Sandra Bin, otherwise known as Sand.
it's not eco music, but a lot of my songs are either how I was living and the struggle with the way I was living. I only normally write a new song when I'm upset. I don't write happy music. I don't think, have I got any songs that are happy? I've got songs that feel okay, but most of them are either the world's going down the tubes or you've upset me. So I'm writing a song about how I feel about that in a not too obvious way, hopefully. Or kind of like, not fantasy, but dreaming a bit. Like a lot of my songs, someone mentioned it to me, loads of them mention the sea. Crops up in tons of my songs, and until someone spotted it and told me, I didn't really realise, and every song I do, I think, my God, there it is again. And I think that must be from being a Brummie and being about as far away from the sea as anywhere. You know, it's landlocked, you're in the centre of the country, so I love the coast, I love seeing the horizon. You don't see a horizon around here unless you go to Hilltop. There's probably a few other places, but so yeah, I'm obsessed with the coast, I think, and I didn't even know. Yeah, so my songs are all travelling, living, being evicted, struggling, ecology, people, world. They're like that. I don't really write love songs. I write breakup songs occasionally. Pete, for example, I loved his lyrics. They were so simple. You know, boy meets girl, girl that time forgot, the girl that I lost, the girl that I loved, you know, always love. Pete had love in all of his songs. Love is love, prisoner of love, you know, because he was an old hippie and it was all about love. And I loved his songs because they were so simple, but they were like Brendan's poetry, they were appropriate for anyone. They were popular. Mine are a little bit they're personal, but I like to think they can be applied to other people. But it's a little harder. I'm always going to play music, I think, as long as I can do. So when you're turning, first thing you do is you feel the weight. How heavy is that pot before you start? You feel the thicknesses. You look for the circle at the bottom, you put your fingers either side the circle, you flip it and you make a mark where your fingertip appears to be. It doesn't have to be exact, but it's a rough idea of what you're doing. Then the most important one is how deep is this bowl? So there's the base, I bring it to where the wall is, and then I make a line, that's what I call my danger line, because I'm going to sink a foot down there. If I go anywhere near that or past it, I'm going to put a hole in the pot. And then the last thing you do is you feel the thicknesses and you work out. So I'm going to take this 1/2 centimetre, I'm going to turn the pot into the foot. I'm going to cut in much more there because it is this wide at that depth. So I'm going to take off all of this here, and if I've got this much to play with, I can make it as narrow as I like. Obviously with a bowl you don't want it too narrow because you don't want it wobbling. So that shape there, you'll see what it becomes at the end. So I'm going to centre it up. I do it by my fingertip, and this is how I teach students because they're not going to tap centre. So you can see the weirder it's off centre. So if I put my fingertip here, look, tap, tap, stop it on the tap, push in the opposite direction. The gap where it's at its widest is how far off centre it is. So if I bring that round and it touches my fingertip, if I pushed it that amount of distance, I would get it perfectly centred. I don't do it over here, I'm just doing it here because you're there. I do it at 6 o'clock here. Look, touch, touch, stop. And then when you've done it for a while, you can do it quite quickly. I wouldn't say I was as quick as the tap centrers, because sometimes tap, tap and they're in. And this isn't one of my pots, so that's pushing but not gapping. Look, push, push. So I have to tell myself this pot is not perfectly symmetrical, And that, look, if I go full speed, you can see it is centered. It's doing this, but it's not doing it crazy style. So that's now centered. So the way I fix a pot on the wheel, you can use water, but again, if I'm using with students, you don't need a massive coil. I take that coil, I put it at 3 o'clock on the wheel head. I push halfway down into the coil, and I hold the other half of the pot. So that's my first one. Do it again. Round the 3 o'clock. Push halfway in, move the coil round. Try and not let the pot move, otherwise you'd start in all again. Then I fill the last one. So normally there's one at 2, 10 and 6. But because these are quite long, and it's to hold it in place. I like to work it all the way around. If I'm teaching students, I'm doing it like this. I work it all the way around the pot. I fix it to the wheel head and I fix it to the pot itself. The two don't stick together because this pot is much drier than this clay that I'm pushing against it. Some people I see on the internet or wherever do this, they put one there, and one there like that. The trouble with doing that is you're going to return down to the top of this. If you put a little coil at the bottom, you can turn, you can actually turn it right to the wheel head, but I don't tend to do that because I like to peel the clay off. So now I'm going to put my marks in. This is where I do need my glasses, certainly because it's not my pot. So private session, I'm now finishing their pots. They came in through and now I'm going to finish them off for them. They've told me what glazes they want. I try and turn them like they were my pots, basically. People who come to my sessions, I like to give them as beautiful as pot back as possible. Why wouldn't you? If they've thrown the basic shape, you take the basic shape and you make it as beautiful as possible, which is trimming as much clay off as you can. That the pot needs. So there's my lines to tell me what I'm doing. There's my danger line. So anywhere above that danger line, I can do what I like. Look, this clay's pretty soft actually. So maybe I'm only going to do one today, which allows me to go home earlier. Here's my width of the base on the inside. That's that circle. So I'm going to push this little edge. Again, I'm bracing. I ride the pedal, or you can ride the pedal when you're turning, because you might want to stop it at any given point. It's not the same as throwing. I put what I call a little dimple in. There's just like a, I don't know, 2-3 mil drop, and then I lift it up and I lay it flat, and then I draw it out slightly, pause, draw it back in, keep doing that, keep taking the trimmings off the tip of your loop tool, these are called. And this one with a square edge and a round edge is all I ever need. So I'm dropping that down. When I started, there was no internet, and there was no one telling you can do that to hear it, because I'm self-taught. So I learned a different way. If the clay started to move and bounce, I'd end up going through, and it tells me it gets so thin, a little bit of it drops and you have this like waveform going on. So your loop tool, if it starts bouncing a little bit up and down, it's quite often indicative that the base of your pot is getting too thin. So it's a visual sign for you to stop. But if you've measured your danger line well enough, it's not quite the height of this loop tool, then you know how much thickness you've got to play with. Drop another little dimple, another couple of mil. Take that foot off till the dimple disappears. So that's what I'm calling a dimple. Look, just a little dip like that in the middle of the clay. And then I take it off. We're getting to a point now where I should stop. So you're going to hear it, hopefully, with the tap that I do at the end of this. So look, you can see that depth there is, I don't know, half this loop tool. That height from the danger line is just 3/4 of the way. So say if I go halfway in, look, push that in. That's about the same thickness as the inside, and that's the sound. Now I say you're looking for a bongo drum sound, which I don't even know what that means, but it's a certain sound you're after that tells you you're at the ideal thickness. That takes quite a lot of practice to hear that sound properly. And I find that the clay changes its sound depending on how dry or wet it is, which doesn't help. So sometimes it goes from a dull sound like this. Yeah, this is where another thing where music helps. What tone are you hearing? So pottery doesn't inform music, I don't think. I can't think of an example, but music does inform pottery. So the two do work together for sure like that. I always thought I was a musician before a potter. I tell people I'm a musician, but that felt a bit cheeky because I wasn't earning money from it and I wasn't doing it professionally. I was just busking and writing tunes, and music's weird like that because you just don't know whether you're any good or not. Even people who could be famous struggle with, you know, they had their own. Neil Young hates his voice supposedly. You know, he's famous, he's earned loads of money, he's done it for 50 years or whatever. He still thinks, you know, maybe am I any good? Music's very much like that, I think. The ego involved in music is a very weird thing. I don't like it. I don't like ego like that. But you kind of got to have it. You've got to have some kind of ego, it appears. Well, you've got to have an ego to play in front of people to start with. Why would you play in front of people? Why don't you just write your song and play it in your bedroom and be happy with that? Why are you sharing it with the world? Because your ego wants to share what you've created. Yeah, you've got to think you're good enough to entertain, yeah, or you've got to think you're good enough that people are going to like what you do, which means that you must have some kind of talent. Luckily, I mean, with me, I learned how to play. I'm self-taught with music as well. So busking's a good leveler, because on the street no one cares, no one's paying, no one has to listen. So if people come and sit next to you when you're playing, they're either after your money in your bag, or they're lonely, or they just like the look of you and they want to talk to you, or they like your music. So there could be more than one reason. But I used to just, people used to say, oh, I really like your voice, or I like that song, or I used to say that I'd log it in. So the first compliment I ever had with music, I logged it in. And then each time I had a compliment, I logged it in. And the more compliments I got over the years, the more I thought, well, I'm not shit then, I must be okay. And then you just have to be wary of that ego running away, I think. I still think it now. If you've got one compliment, if that's like one person in your street gives you a compliment, if you imagine that, it's like having 10 people in your village, 100 people in your town, 1,000 people in your city, 200,000 people in your country. You can exponentially take that one person's compliment and think, well, if there's 10,000 people like that person in the world, that must mean 10,000 people will like that song or like your voice. Or so that's how, as a non-ego person, I learned to give myself a little bit of just be easy on yourself. Any creation, I think you've got to play with it. You've got to play with it, and you've got to just not beat yourself up about it. That's the trick with creation. And then, because I've met so many people that have gone, oh, I wish I could do that. I wish I could play guitar. I'm like, have you ever tried? No. Well, try. It takes you 3 months to stretch your fingers and to build some pads up if you practice a little bit per day, or like when you're busking, you might be playing 6-7 hours a day. If you're trying to earn money to survive in a strange city or wherever you're travelling to, then that's what you do. Also, you're out on the streets. Barcelona's a lovely place, and places that have nice weather, you enjoy being outside, meeting people, playing music, people enjoying it, hopefully. If you're lucky, you earn enough money to buy a loaf of bread and a bit of soup in the soup kitchen or whatever. And that's the way it is. So now look, there is a little bit more there, but it's not my pot. Chattering, like I was saying, I'm going to just do it quickly just to show you, is this kidney. I'm not going to do it on their pot though, because they didn't ask me to do it necessarily. So once I've chattered this pot, I'm going to unchatter it, and it is, look, thick enough still. So you spin full speed, you take your kidney and you've got to bend that edge until it hits the clay coming towards you. So you drop it flat, you brace as ever, you bring that edge round, and then it'll do that. Once you hear that grounding, gurning noise, you're chattering. I love it because I've got no idea what I've done until I stop the wheel.
Oh, wow.
So that's what I love doing because I'm a bit lazy. I like these surface textures. Everyone's unique the way you chatter it because you can't repeat exactly the same thing every time. So then what I do is I make a little gallery of the chatter like that.
What's called chatter?
Not sure. Well, it judders, chattering. I don't really know why they call it chattering. I mean, I always say I chatter it off naturally, and then I chatter when I'm on the wheel as well. So you can't win with me. But they didn't ask me to do that, so I'm going to take it off now. But I do that with lots of my pots because when you put the glaze on, I normally fill them with slip, or I put a slip on the top of it. Well, let me quickly show you that just as I'm here. Now this is a blue slip, but it looks grey. They often don't look like the covers they are. So I take a hake brush, which is for slip, I drop it on the chatter, and it picks up all the chatter lines like that. So that's my thing. If I wanted it 3D, I could push the slip I could push it into the chatter lines, and then normally when it's dry, that's pushed into the grooves that I've made. Normally you'd let that dry a bit, but then if you take off the surface area, so you can work kind of positive, negative look. So if I take that surface area, it's all in the little lines that I've made, look. So that's like I don't know whether that's positive or negative or whatever the phrase is, but I don't normally do that. But that's like light blue slip in there. The bits where it's brown, our clay fire's kind of creamy white. So anywhere where there's no colour there, we'll fire creamy white. Wherever there's this kind of light grey colour will be blue. So that's why I like using slips, because you can do things like that. So now I'm going to take it off with a sponge. And whatever glaze they've asked for, it's probably now. Once I do that, you won't even see that blue slip. So to tidy up, I just use a bit of sponge, just to soften any of the angles round or any burrs that you've put in the clay. And I'm just going to turn it a little bit more so I get rid of all those things that I've just put on the pot. And that's job done really there now. And then I hope when I take it off, and I can also see, remember I was saying about feel the weight. If I take all the trimmings here that I've done, look how much I've took off. And I feel the weight on it's got some water on, but I feel the weight of it, and that's plenty. And it wasn't that massively heavy to start with. So now I'm going to take the pot off, and then that's the first one I've trimmed. Then it's going to go in the bisque firing, and the shape will be fixed. So to take it off, all I do is use my kidney, and I'm going to slice the rim as it's turning slowly like this. Brace, lay the kidney flat, slice underneath. You want to go fairly slow generally, unless you're used to it, and then it'll do that. It might have a bit of trouble releasing because it's got a bit wet from the slip. So So now, I call this the big reveal. You take it to the edge, flip it. There's that shape I was talking about with the foot nicely in, and then you get rid of the sombrero, whatever you call it. The hat, by taking a needle tool, finding the gap, breaking the clay, and then peeling it off the pot. This is what I like to do. That's why I don't turn all the way down to the wheel head, because I'd rather take it off like this. And then when it's a bit drier, because it's a little fragile at the moment, I'm going to, in fact it's going to be careful, I'm not going to warp the shape. Yeah, this is the water factor. Because I put water on to get rid of the slip, it's attached this clay to the pot, so you get some of these burrs like that. Okay. If I leave a little ridge, it doesn't normally bother me, because I either use that as a design feature, or, like I said, when it's a little drier, normally I'm faffing with it, you get what we call a fettling cloth, otherwise known as a scouring cloth, sponge, and you just rub the pot and you tidy it up like I'm doing now with this needle tool. The more you work with clay, the more you realise how to touch it in a way where you can work with it and it doesn't fight you, it works with you. So anyway, I've just said what I should do, which is leave that, because look, if you push, you can deform. If it starts going off perfect full moon central circular, it drives me nuts. So if it does that, you can take a rounder, plonk it in and give it a little rounding like that, and then it becomes perfect again. And my trick is to bag it, to let it dry. There we go, job done by the tidy up. What are you planning on doing now? Do you fancy a pint or?
Yeah, a pint sounds good.
I haven't eaten anything, maybe we should have something to eat. Do you want a curry?
This one's called Give Me a Reason. Good. Thank you kindly.